Hi folks, we're Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the claims made by the farming, agricultural, and the construction sectors of, for example, the US economy, that are screaming from the rooftops that without an illegal alien workforce, that's people in the United States illegally, without such an illegal workforce, nothing will get done. Never again will an apple get picked, or a tomato get picked, or anything agricultural happen. There'll be fruit picking, avocados, and whatever. It's all going to go. Nothing will ever get picked again, and in construction, no road will ever be built, no bridge will ever be built, no construction will take place, and so on. Now, the claim is that in construction, approximately 60% of the workers are illegal aliens, and that in agriculture, the numbers are even higher, particularly where it's fruit picking and things like that are involved. The numbers are allegedly over 80%, if not 90% in some cases. So the claim is that well, look, nothing can ever happen again. Now, one of the, I guess, there's a few things come up with that. Firstly, it's just all lies, and so we can dismiss it out of hand. But let's come back to this issue of why are there so many illegal aliens when it's illegal to hire them, and many of them will be using stolen, fraudulent social security numbers. I mean, the amount of fraud and corruption just involved, to admit that the 60% of our workforce is illegal aliens is in itself staggering, and that there's no penalties involved. They're not frightened of penalties. They don't seem to care. This is astonishing. They've just admitted to massive scale illegality, and yet it's done with a shoulder shrug. And the Democrat politicians are running around saying that again, these workers are essential. They have to stay. They must be given citizenship, and so on and so forth. But there's a few problems sort of come out of this. And I'd like to run through them in this essay. Now, one of the things I noticed when I first started traveling around third world countries on business was how astonishingly inefficient things are. Jobs that could be done by two professionally, properly trained people in, say, Australia, could take 50 people to do it in a third world country. And something simple like, say, bags of concrete. So the concrete's delivered in bags. Now, assuming it has to be delivered in bags, but there's no concrete pouring machine to pour the concrete for a slab or some sort of concrete works, some sort of construction. So it arrives in concrete bags. Now, typically in Australia, there'd be a powered conveyor belt, so you'd put it all on the put all the bags of concrete in a conveyor belt. That would go all the way to close to at least the work site, or at the point of use, and where there would then be smaller concrete mixing machines that would be operating, small machines attached. So if that were the case, then you would still only need one guy to load it, one guy to take it off. Now, when I go to a third world country, they don't have any machines anywhere, and it's all people doing it. So they're standing shoulder to shoulder, and everybody wants a piece of the action. Everybody wants to be part of the show here, and it's much excitement. And because these are people who may never have had a job in their lives, and so they pass the bags of dry concrete down these human chains, and with bricklaying, they're standing shoulder to shoulder. There's no string line, so the thing snakes around like a I don't know how long that structure is going to stand. So the quality, the standards, the professionalism, the training, the lack of automation meant that the jobs that could be done by a handful of people in the West were needed again 50, 100 people. I've seen just in the building of like a community hall in just an outer suburban area of a third world country, it seemed like there was 1 million people swarming around it. all getting in each other's way, and it was probably the most inefficient thing you'd ever seen. Now, at that time, Australia or other first world countries, it could be, the United States or wherever, the amount of automation that was there, and again, the properly trained people and so on, thought being given to the setup of the work site so that concrete trucks could make a turn and come in, all the details, things that you don't see in third world countries. The efficiency was in the training, the systems, the processes, but particularly the automation was one of the bigger issues there. So lots of automation in Australia or a first world country, and almost no automation in a third world country. Now, why in a third world country did they not have automation? Well, because labour is so cheap. A lot of the people there doing the work weren't even being paid. They'd maybe been given a free meal or something like that. So there was really no cost. Why would you invest in machinery, efficiency, labour-saving machinery when you've got millions, tens of millions of people who are unemployed? The unemployment rate in effect in these places is 60-70% higher. Women don't work in these society, or many of them. So this is sort of one of the main differences: efficiency and automation training and whatnot. So why is that? Why are these construction and farming agricultural organisations complaining about that they need workers? Well, there's very little automation. In fact, the automation on a construction site today seems to be no greater, if not less, than it used to be 30 years ago, because cheap labour's come flooding in, and it's just easier to use them. As soon as it starts to rain, you can stand them down and send them home. So because of the deteriorating terms of employment, these third world illiterate peasant coolies can be treated in such a way that labour saving is cost per hour of having these people. You've got these standby people that can come in the minute you need them, that you can send home when it rains, or if some other stuff arrives late or isn't coming that day, you can send them home. So you can do all these things to them and treat them in a way that you couldn't white workers. So the terms of employment have changed to mean that the quality of planning and organisation on construction sites has also gone downhill. You don't need to be good anymore, because you can transfer the problem of piss poor planning. You can transfer the cost of that bad quality planning. You can transfer it onto the worker. So you can just say, worker, all you third world peasants, you can all go home now, and we don't have to pay you. And this is done through labour hire company scams and all sorts of things like that. So they, again, rather than solve a problem of productivity, they just move the problem around. Say, well, we won't bother solving the core issue. We'll just push the cost of our piss poor management and planning. We'll just push that cost onto the worker. In order to do that, we need to have lots of third world coolies hired through, brought in through labour hire scams and so on. So the amount of automation on work sites seems to be less than it was. It could be in my imagination, but I don't think so. So I'm looking, the business that I part on has quite a lot to do with various sort of elements and aspects of construction, big ticket construction and so on. So I get a fairly close up frontline sort of frontline seat view of these things, and I'm surprised at how the reliant, as cheap labour became, third world labour became more plentiful, a lot of organisations decided not to have automation, or not to use automation, not to bother with it, or have less of it. Now, some of this too is that the big construction firms have pushed that lower level labouring, the digging of the holes, the pouring of the concrete. They've pushed that onto smaller subcontractors. Now, these smaller subcontractors can't really afford to invest heavily in plant and equipment because they can't afford the payments and things like that. So they, instead of having automation, they just again use third world peasant labour. So the way the construction sector
structured, the way it's organised now, is that the big firms are effectively the designers and the managers and owners of the big brand, if you like, the big multinational brand name. They're also, globalist flunkies, creating a lot of do-nothing jobs for black lesbians and the like. So they're looking at that, but the actual physical work of doing things, the heavy lifting, if you will, the digging of the holes and all that sort of stuff, that's done by subcontractors who are operating on pretty skinny profit margins. And again, they can't afford to buy, or it's high risk for them to buy the $1 million pieces of automation the big company could afford to buy. They can manage that in their cash flow, but the smaller subcontractor can't. So they replace that automation factor with cheap labour, and this is where the 60% illegal aliens are coming in. They're a replacement and a substitute for the new economic model that's used in construction, and that economic model is shaped as much as anything by the cheap labour coming in. So we can see here how cheap third world peasant labour has actually subverted productivity, has undermined it, and has corrupted the entire process, and has allowed the big name construction firms to reposition themselves again as managers and designers and so on, and just organisers of smaller subcontractors to do the heavy work, the hard work. Now again, this plethora of small subcontractors operating on skinny margins, their reliance on peasant labour, third world illegal aliens, of course, is proportionally higher because they can't afford to do the automation. So the automation's declined. Now, if we look at agriculture, we look at the agricultural sector, then again, there's things like, say you've got broadacre wheat fields and corn fields. You can, there's big harvester equipment that you can get. There's big names, John Deere, and there's all big names in agricultural equipment. And so anything that's broadacre, you can automate it quite easily. And if you've got a broadacre farm, then you'd be able to afford to have some form of decent or reasonable automation. You wouldn't be relying on labourers of any sort, be they illegal aliens or anything. You wouldn't have as much reliance. So it's a small, that the labour factor, the labour cost component of doing that is broadacre farming of things like wheat is fairly low. Now, when you come to fruit planting and picking and those sorts of things, for example, apples, oranges, avocados and so on, that's a different, asparagus, potatoes. That's quite a different matter. It is quite labour intensive, or can be quite labour intensive. Now, again, you've got an issue here with to go to the next level of efficiency. Farmers or agriculture, a lot of these are big firms, by the way. They're not all small plot privately owned farms, far from it. So the level of automation for things like fruit picking is a little bit complex, because all the apples on the tree may not be equally ripe, and if it's a very early stage apple, it's not really ready to be picked. You want to leave that on the tree, but you do want to pick the ripe apple. So there's a degree of discernment and I suppose experience, you could say, in fruit picking and things like that. You don't want to pick the apple too early because it'll rot before it reaches some sort of ripe maturity, and so you can't sell that. So there is that level of discernment. Now, unless you're getting experienced fruit pickers from illiterate third world peasants from the desert or from the jungle, they're not going to know about picking apples. The idea that these people have expertise is absurd. So the agricultural operators, they're not investing in automation to the extent that they could. And now in some of the sort of middle range operators, they're pointing out, well, look, this machine, to get this machine, it's going to cost $1 million. And that's that's almost the entire sales of the farm for the year, $1 million in selling produce, be it apples or oranges, whatever else it might be. So there's a huge investment there. They're getting screwed by the big grocery chains their margins are under pressure. And if they have, for example, an extreme weather event, or it's particularly dry on things like that, then that can throw them out, and the farm will be unviable, and then the banks will want to come in and repossess it, and things like that. So so they balk at the amount of lower level automation's fine, that they can amortize out. But when they want to move to that next step of automation to really turn the business into something efficient, then it isn't that easy. They do have issues there to invest in such a lot of plant and equipment. Not all farms, the big multinational farms, they won't invest in that sort of stuff because labour is so cheap. So similar to the construction sector, where they could invest in that, they could afford to, but as long as you've got access to that sort of cheap labour, and there's a lot of corruption in the people are in Australia, workers there, you've got to work for 3 months in the agricultural sector if you want to have a work visa for Australia. But the most of the labour hire firms that are bringing these folks in pay a bribe to the farmer, and then move the people into the cities anyway. So there's a huge amount of corruption there that the government, it seems, unable or unwilling to look at or scrutinise up close. So how do you deal with the level of, now, my way of thinking, the Western governments, and hopefully the Trump administration will look and consider this, is to insist that if you want to bring in outside workers, illegal aliens aren't going to stay, they're going. So that's it, they're gone. What are you now going to do then? You can give the jobs to American workers, American citizens, and you can increase the level of automation. Oh, but why should we spend money on expensive equipment when we can get these cheap, exploitable third world peasants? Well, too fucking bad. You're not going to be able to exploit those third world peasants anymore, and you're going to have to either give the jobs to locals and do a mixture of automation, increased automation, and whether it be a factory or a construction site or picking fruit, it doesn't matter. You're going to have to increase that. But the government then needs to I believe, the government needs to sort of pony up some breaks for these guys. So, okay, well, you're going to have to automate to create that level of efficiency, and so you can be productive and produce quality output and this sort of thing. So we're going to give you accelerated write-downs. So normally it would take, for example, 3 or 5 years or however long to write down this big investment in capital equipment. But we're going to accelerate this, and we're going to say you can write it down in 2 years. And if you're a smaller operator, a medium to smaller operator, say in farming or something, you can write the whole thing off in 1 year, as in write it off on your tax. So this would allow the business to stay profitable, but also have that increased productivity from the increased capacity for automation. So I think this is vital. And if we think outside the square on this, and look at ways to say, well, automate. But on top of that, Americans are ingenious, and a lot of Western engineers and designers are. If they're presented with a problem, how can we efficiently pick apples off the tree? For example, pick apples off the tree. Then people way cleverer than me are going to sit down. They'll design something to do it, and then we'll have all sorts of new technologies and innovations and inventions coming from that. And that in turn would then create new jobs for technical service people to maintain the products, and designers, factories to make those sort of things, and so on. So this is the direction to go in. But the future is not exploitable, illegal, illiterate peasant aliens from the third world. That's not the future. It's not a viable future. The globalists want to force it on us, but it's not a viable future. And I think the policies and the platform and agenda of the President Trump's administration are reflecting that, and have come to grips with at least that part of the reality. But again, let's go a step further here. What can we do to make this work? And I think accelerated write-downs, allowances, or soft loans, as in no interest, those sorts of things can make the difference in increasing the level of automation, which would then obviate the need for exploitable, illiterate third world peasants. You've been with Tassos today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.